Police stations are covered in cameras that record your every word and action. Yet even the most cunning criminals sometimes forget this, resulting in some terrifying moments. This is precisely what occurred to Chris Watts, a husband and father of two, accused of murdering his whole family, whose entire defense crumbled once he forgot he was being recorded. Chris and his new wife purchased a home in 2013 and raised two children there. But in August of 2018, Chris decided to pursue his relationship with another female, Nicole, and thus separated from his entire family. The couple argued for weeks, but it all came to a climax in an argument on August 13, 2018. An argument that would end with Shannon Lang strangled in a shallow grave in their garden, and his daughters smothered and trapped in oil drums in an attempt to hide the bodies. Chris carried on with his day as if nothing had occurred, but it wouldn't be long until his family was reported missing by a friend. And assumed to be dead, Chris made an apparent attempt to appear surprised and in denial, even giving repeated interviews to news outlets in which he pleaded with his family to return home.
Shannon, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here.
However, after failing a simple lie detector test in police custody, an 8-hour-long interrogation began. At first, Chris maintained his innocence, stressing that he had no idea where they could be. But after hours of passing interviews and more polygraph tests, he asked to speak with his father, where he would finally make a mistake.
She heard him? Yeah. Well, no, I heard like a little commotion upstairs, but I didn't think anything of it. And then we went back upstairs and she was there. I could see like she climbed out. Almost choking like that. Did she kill him? They were blue. She choked both of them with that. I freaked out when she said anything. I heard him choking and then there's babies. That's what I feel horrible about. They're a freaking oil tank. Please God, forgive me for it.
Chris had completely forgotten that he was being filmed and assumed that just because the detectives weren't in the room, nobody could hear him, and he was free to say whatever he wanted. But of course, this wasn't the case, and just seconds after confessing to his father, the detectives returned to the room and eventually arrested him months later. He was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences, but it's not usually a direct confession that the police find when criminals do. He was homeschooled as a youngster and never fit in with his siblings, frequently picking on them and overall being terrible to them. Dawson's strange behavior continued into adulthood, and he became obsessed with Halloween masks and horror movies and was frequently seen ominously walking around his house at night in full costume. Because of his behavior and demeanor, Dawson was still living with his mother in 2008, but this only made him worse eventually in his 20s. After he became extremely disrespectful to his mother, she told him it was time to move out. This, of course, enraged Dawson, and at around 4:30 p.m., he stabbed his mother 10 times across her neck and torso. Just half an hour later, Dawson's sister Caitlin called her to no response. This concerned Caitlin, and the next day, Caitlin called the police just minutes later. After arriving and forcing entry into Kathleen's room, Kathleen's lifeless body was found lying on her bed, and it wouldn't take long for them to find their main suspect, as the next day, Caitlin called the police. Dawson was detained while wearing a jacket smeared with his mother's blood, but his behavior in the questioning room was the most incriminating. Dawson reasoned that his peculiar habits and behaviors could be enough for him to claim insanity if he only pretended to be insane to the cops, but this proves to be his worst error.
I want to talk to you about what happened to your mom.
People called me and said something happened at home to Mom. They were very bad. What happened to my mom?
Well, that's what I'm asking you.
Wait, I'm supposed to have an attorney?
You want to ask for an attorney?
Yeah.
Okay.
Observe how, when he hears a detective enter the room, he quickly puts on a strange act of hand movements, combined with distant, stuttered speech, not realizing that this instant switch was captured on cameras that were recording the entire time. This footage was enough for a jury to determine him as completely sane and sentence him to 15 years in prison. But while it's very amusing, it's unusual for a criminal to completely forget that they're being filmed. So what happens when Russell was being investigated for the murder of Aaron Fryer, a father of 3 who had been brutally beaten to death in his sleep with a baseball bat? At the time of the interrogation, police had already apprehended 2 other people for this murder, 15-year-old Ellen Fryer and her 19-year-old boyfriend George. But Russell was also present when George and Ellen were picked up, so he too was brought in for questioning. Throughout his time in police custody, Russell was friends with the policeman. And while he was upfront about his dislike of cops in general, he was convinced that the handful he was speaking with were the good ones.
Gavin and Ellie are to be released to me because the assault her father did the morning of the incident, defending a female. And I know everything that I'm saying is being recorded, and I'm doing it on purpose.
He spoke with them cordially enough that they went out of their way to get him food and beverages to keep him company during the interrogation. And on the drive to the police station, he even opened up to the cops about his own business ventures.
She started my own protection business.
Did you?
Yeah.
What kind of protection?
I know it's kind of risky, but I work with people 20 and younger, legally considered runaway kind of age.
So you provide protection for runaways and get them like a place to live?
But the moment he was alone with the camera, it was as if a switch was flipped, and Russell became one of the strangest and, for lack of a better term, most guilty people ever filmed in a police interrogation. It's honestly difficult for me to put this behavior into words, so take a look for yourself.
You're listening in on my conversations, aren't you? I don't care if you're fed or not. I can still twist your little mind. Don't piss me off. So, we can do this the nice way and we negotiate, or we can do it the hard way and I can release my bipolar. Let's make a deal. 1, thanks for the food. 2, I see Ellie and Gavin because they are both under my protection. 3, before you release Ellie to her parents, or parent, do a background check as well as a drug test. And if you find out that her mom is in fact doing drugs, you are to release her to me. But if you're one of those two-timing, donut-eating piece of crap that don't like rules, a high school bully with a badge, I'm sorry, buddy, but I eat high school bullies for breakfast.
But in addition to these frankly hilarious and entertaining conversations with himself, Russell begins to reveal information about the case without anyone else in the room.
Gavin and Ellie are to be released to me because the assault her father did the morning of the incident, defending a female. And I know everything that I'm saying is being recorded, and I'm doing it on purpose.
It obviously didn't take long for police to convict him after this, but due to the absurdity of his behavior in this footage, it took them a while to determine whether Russell could legally be considered insane or not. Eventually, it was determined that he would be sentenced to 15 to 18 years in prison, with his accomplices each receiving 25 years as the main perpetrators of the crime.